Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at a classic movie all the way back to the year 1972. I'm talking about Frenzy. Now, Frenzy was the second to the last movie that Alfred Hitchcock directed. His last one was in 1976, which was Family Plot. And then, of course, sadly he passed away in 1980. Not only did he direct this movie, this is a British thriller movie, and it runs for 1 hour and 56 minutes long. Once again, it's direct. Not only is it directed by Alfred Hitchcock, it's also produced by Alfred Hitchcock as well. The script was written by Anthony Schaefer, and it is based on the novel Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square by Arthur LeBurn. All right. The score was done by Ron Goodwin. The cinematography by Gilbert Taylor and Leonard J. South. And the editing was done by John Jimpson, I should say, yes. And the stars of this movie are John Finch, Mike McCowen, Barry Foster, Billie Whitelaw, Anna Massey, Barbara Leigh-Hunt, Bernard Cribbins, Vivien Marchant, Michael Bates, Gene Marsh, and Clive Swift. Now, as you all know, these guys are not big household names, except that I do know Clive Swift from the British comedy Keeping Up Appearances. He, of course, plays the long-suffering, eternally disgruntled husband, Richard Bucket. I mean, Bouquet. Yeah, he was in it. He plays a small role. But other than that, there's not really any big names there. Although Hitchcock did consider having Michael Caine be in this movie, Vanessa Redgrave and Helen Mirren were in consideration for certain roles, but they all sort of rejected Hitchcock for undisclosed reasons. So Frenzy was like Alfred Hitchcock coming back to his original roots of his life, where he started his career before settling in Hollywood. Yes, you could say this is a bit of a homecoming for Alfred Hitchcock. It was also a comeback for him after three failed movies that came right after The Birds. I'm talking about Marnie, Torn Curtain, and Topaz. This film fit right into his narrative of the falsely accused man seeking revenge against the real culprit, even though he goes through the trials and tribulations along the way. Though the film is a dark, brooding, and definitely more graphic than Hitchcock's other movies as a way to appease the audience of the time, Frenzy is still has time to add some gritty suspense. Sometimes they're really like disturbing and unsettling, but hey, what do you expect? It's Hitchcock, for Christ's sake. Of course, there's also some over the top jokes, mostly particularly in dark humor, to go along with the wild ride ahead. Set in London, England, Frenzy stars John Finch as unlucky former Royal Air Force military guy Richard Blaney, who has been reduced of his high esteemed rankings and seems to have lowered himself by doing several menial jobs and not keeping them. When we first meet him, he's working at a tavern and he's been secretly consuming alcohol, which is against the bar's protocol. He's been sneaking them off behind the boss's back till one day the boss caught him and told him that he should pay up whatever severance allowance that he gave him and to just get the fuck out. Maybe not in those exact words, but pretty much what it is. So now he's broke, he's penniless, and he seems to be somewhat very dependent and desperate in need for money. That guy just can't get a lucky break. Now, I'm not going to actually go out and say that Richard is really that good of a guy, because that would be an inconvenient on my part, because the guy really is not exactly what you would call a warm, friendly individual. He's aggressive, he's volatile, he's short tempered, and he is just pathetic in nature. He may probably look like the strong masculine type because of his military experience and background, but underneath all that toxic masculinity that's brewing inside of him, he's practically weak and fragile. He also, like I said, he does not come across as being a cookie cutter protagonist, as you know. He's aggressive in nature. Like I said, he's got an explosive humor. He's got an explosive demeanor, I should say, and he also seems to somewhat be, you know, not exactly what you would call the charming type. So after getting fired, things just seemed to spiral from bad to worse, as he had become a primary suspect to the murder of his ex-wife, Barbara Leigh-Hunt, who died after being choked to death by the mysterious necktie killer. Okay, and you're asking me, who is this mysterious necktie killer? Well, it seems that he belongs pretty much around the same ranks and the same annals as other notorious, famous um, serial killers, from the likes of Jack the Ripper to the Boston Strangler to Jack the Hugger, you know, the Zodiac Killer, the Gemini, those people, those notorious um, individuals who do a series of ritualistic killings as kind of a bit of what's that word? A calling card. Yeah, that's what it is. It's a calling card. So this mysterious necktie killer is known to choke and annihilate people with the confines of a necktie. Well, apparently Richard is now being the number one primary suspect to his ex-wife's death. Now, his ex-wife seems to have had a bit of a successful career with her. I mean, she's working as a marriage counselor. She is seems to be doing quite well with herself, making great money, being successful. She doesn't really particularly need him in his life, but he's still begging for money and stuff like that. But she also repents from giving it to him because she knows that he's just gonna use that money just to go out and get drunk. And she decides to just stamp her foot down and doesn't gotta take this shit. But of course, he's gonna go off on the tangent, and he says some rather unflattering things. Apparently, her receptionist overhears it. She calls the cops. She thinks that he was the one who killed his ex-wife because they got into an argument, and he was using a lot of aggressive things. But then we also discovered that he wasn't actually the one who killed her, and that he's not the necktie killer. Now, even though this guy is an unsympathetic individual, there are still parts of us that actually take sympathy for him. So as much as a bad person that he is, we still feel bad for this guy because he is actually a innocent man who is being the primary suspect to a series of killings. And he is trying to convince people that no, I did not kill my wife. But nobody wants to believe him because of his reputation as being the town drunk, and because of the fact that he is a very explosive, volatile individual. And that nobody believes him. And nobody wants to believe him. I mean, if they send this poor bastard to jail, nobody's going to give a shit. Because he's not exactly a very well-liked individual. Next, we are also introduced to a grocer from the Covent Garden area who goes by the name of Bob Rusk, played by Barry Foster, who is pretty much friends with Richard, and maybe probably the only one who is friends with him. Now, Bob Rusk is actually a pretty decent guy who's got a very good job working in the food market business. He seems to do quite well for himself. He's also seems to be somewhat of a good person in nature. He'll wave at people, a friendly individual. But then in the end, underneath all that innocent and friendly, kind-hearted guy, well, it just goes to show you that you just can't judge a book by its cover. And that's the dynamics you get from both Richard and Bob. They might probably, in public, act the way you would expect, but deep underneath inside, they're not all who they are cut out to be. And though it appears that way, since both individuals are complete contrasts to each other, while Richard, like I said, is hot-tempered, self-contained, and rather unlikable, by contrast, we have Bob, who is charismatic, friendly, and pretty easy to get along with. But like I said, like a book, you can't determine a book by its cover. The characteristics of both characters can't be judged by their personalities either. Underneath the surfaces, Bob is actually a pretty evil individual. But it's through his personality that no one actually really believes or even suspects that he's capable of doing evil things. Alright, hey, look, spoiler alert. He's the necktie killer! That's right, you heard me. He's the necktie killer. He may not probably act like he's the necktie killer because he's just so warm and friendly, but when he's behind closed doors, he seduces women, strips them of their clothes, gets them involved in sexual acts, rapes them, and then strangles them with a fucking necktie. So in the end, this guy is the actual killer. And we see that during, the first 30 minutes, during the first opening 30 minutes on the movie. We reveal that he is. So I know that although the suspense element is probably taken out of the equation, the thing that keeps us going is when will they finally realize that Richard was the one who was innocent all this time and that Bob Rusk is actually the one behind these necktie strangulation procedures. And while Richard, though, yeah, so while Richard is trying to prove he's innocent, Bob, who, like I said, is the real necktie killer, is continually gagging female praise and enjoying watching someone else getting framed for it. Yeah, right. Good friends you have there, Richard. And so does Bob. He's just scum of the earth. So after Richard begs Bob to prove he's innocent, Bob betrays he and Richard is sentenced to life in jail. But Richard vows that he will get even by way of vengeance no matter what. The only silver light to prove to what Richard is saying is true comes from Police Inspector Oxford, played by Alec McCowen, who firmly thinks Richard isn't the killer and wants to get the killer before Richard stays true to his word. So even though this is not necessarily a whodunit mystery movie, it's more suspense than anything. Since we all know that Bob Rusk is the necktie killer, it's really all the matter of will justice be served to the right person, or will an innocent individual be framed for a crime he didn't commit? It's nice that this thriller has turned the villain into a more compassionate character, while the hero turns out to be a real hateful individual. Yes, it goes to show you that not all evil people have an aggressive state of mind. They could be calm, they could be quiet. Hey, sometimes they always say it's the quiet ones you have to be on the lookout for. And while Richard, is the hero in this movie, he's not exactly trying to collect brownie points or sympathy points with you, because it's not easy to commit those kind of protocols because of his somewhat uncouth reputation. But there you go. Don't judge the book by its cover type of thing. That's what I'm trying to get at. The sad part of who's guilty until proven innocent story has truly lost its level of edginess because stories like these have been done to death. Even as old as a 1972 movie like this, we've had seen so many movies about innocent people being framed while the guilty is running around free. I know in some ways in life itself a lot of that does happen. You know, guilty until proven innocent. And yes, many times innocent people have been framed for 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 incarceration and even capital punishment too. Even though I don't condone capital punishment or executions or sentence to deaths, I don't care. Even though lethal injections is probably the least painful procedure, I still don't root for that. Still, a lot of times, even today with more modern technology, innocent people can still be convicted for crimes that they did not necessarily commit, no matter how concrete the proof or evidence is. Our modern technology still has not been 100% effective and 100% accurate. I mean, it's gotten better over the years, but it's still not the best. And that's kind of like what you see here, too. Once again, you have an innocent person being persecuted for a crime he didn't commit. When this film came out in 1972, it was a time when hedonistic restrictions were loosening, and Hitchcock took advantage by making scenes more graphic and plenty of nudity scenes, which is not presented seductively, but when they were raped and killed by this sick freak of an individual. Yes, hedonistic rituals were starting to loosen in the 70s, as you do see quite a bit of flesh in this movie. Well, because, the necktie killer is not only just choking or strangling people with their neckties, he is seducing women, getting them involved in sexual acts, ripping their clothes off, raping them, and then choking them to death with a necktie. It's not a pretty picture. But it goes to show you that Hitchcock was trying to get ahead of the times, even during through the last stages of his career. Even though his career and his life was coming to a close, he knew that the modern audiences were more into somewhat more looser restrictions when it comes to graphic details. So Hitchcock took the initiative to just stay legit with the times, which is pretty amiable of him, even though the scenes can be quite unsettling and very, very distracting. And sure, it's tamed by today's standards, but this was, the one and only time a Hitchcock film was actually truly rated R. And though panned by the mass at the time for understandable reasons, because of the graphic nature in this movie, but others had actually praised the film as to showcase the real ugliness behind serial deaths visually over simply talking about it. Instead of just, chat, 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 we actually get visual indicators. And if you show us a visual uh, crime scene with strangulated naked women, we actually see a more sense of authentic realness to it. Like I said, it's not pretty, and it's distracting. I'm not kidding you. But at least it was something that the fans did praise over because of Hitchcock's efforts and his attempts to give something for the audience, something to think about. And it's not just for like cheap shock value either. Of course, purists will definitely condemn this movie because of the ugliness that's displayed in the movie. But still, more moderate or modernized individuals would praise it because Hitchcock's just trying to get with the times here, folks. And then there were others who thought that with Hitch's advanced age, he was getting lazy and was just bowing down to the younger generation who were gravitating for graphic scenes in his movies. Oh, that's a possibility. But, this is what the fans wanted to see. They wanted to see more graphic stuff, graphic details. And sometimes just talking about it doesn't really do justice. It's actually showing us, it's showcasing it to us. As sick as it is, it's pretty much up there, and you just have to just accept it. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it. There are some scenes that clearly symbolize the scenes that truly define the magic behind Hitch's direction. For example, when Rusk takes his next victim to his abode, the camera follows them to the stairway and then turns away to focus on the streets below while the dastardly deeds proceed. Another scene that highlights Hitch's craft was inside the potato truck, where Rusk is hiding a concealed piece of evidence from his latest evil duty. The claustrophobic and intense scene sees the audience strangely feeling for the victim in hopes that he doesn't get caught or left wondering how he will get out of this predicament. And of course, the symbolic use of dark humor goes into effect of his scenes, like when a city official is talking to the public mass about the dangers of water pollution, and then a dead naked woman comes floating by, which actually while this person is talking about the dangers and the evils of water pollution, suddenly the attention is turned not from this individual, but from the dead naked woman. Oh, I guess that's a lot more interesting and more fascinating to watch than to hear blah 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 water pollution. Water pollution is bad, okay? You know. But then people see a dead woman, it's like, whoa, a dead naked woman, far out, man. No, no, not nothing like that. But what's I mean, there is that dark humor that did come about. While one person is boring us to death with water pollution lectures, suddenly we're all treated to seeing a dead naked woman floating in the water. Another scene is the ironic breaking of breadsticks, especially when the police inspector goes over details that his victim's deceased hands were cracked, just like the breadsticks. Very classic dark humor. There is some other humorous scenes too, including the police inspector's wife, who seems to have grown a somewhat obsession with gourmet cooking, when in the end it turns out that her cooking is practically crap. But, I guess so he doesn't hurt her feelings, he'll eat it anyway. And then maybe behind her back, he'll just order Chinese. Okay, though this is not at the same level of classic Hitchcock like Vertigo or Psycho or Rear Window or North by Northwest. Those are all classic Hitchcock. Frenzy still has, a level of symbolism that made Alfred Hitchcock the great director that he was, and that he got his groove back after 3 failures before The Birds. Like Marnie, Torn Curtain, Topaz. Those are real below him. But at least Frenzy gave him at least a little bit of some hope, in hopes that, he doesn't end up, like on his deathbed doing just mediocre films during the last stages of his life. So at least so at least with Frenzy, this was his one last great hurrah. And if it would have been just his last movie, at least he would have had a good farewell send-off. But then in 1976, he did what was to be his last movie, which was Family Plot. But if you never saw Family Plot, don't worry, it's not worth your time. That movie is a piece of shit. So if you didn't see Family Plot, like I said, don't worry, you didn't miss much. But Frenzy is definitely his best movie during the last years of his life, the last of his good movies. And then, of course, sadly, he passed away in 1980. So, if you're going to give Hitchcock a farewell salute, I would probably say Frenzy would be the one to do so. Um, like I said, this is not his best movie. I mean, like I said, the 50s were one. I mean, it's definitely still inferior to his movies like Vertigo, Rear Window, North by Northwest, and Psycho. Those are classic Hitchcock. But this movie does hold on pretty well, pretty decently. And, there's a lot of suspense, a lot of thriller that goes with it. It does keep you interested the whole way through. It never meanders. It tells the story, sticks to the plot, and never lets go. And we hope that, justice is served to the right person, even though you probably don't want him to go to jail because he's such a nice guy, but underneath all that kindness, he's an evil person. And even though the hero is somebody who you don't really necessarily like, at least, it goes to show you that even the most unlikable individuals do sometimes need to have their innocence proven correctly. So if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Frenzy an 8 out of 10. I still highly recommend you to see this movie. It's not a classic, but it's still, one of his more better movies, especially during the later years of his career. And I think that kind of ends my review. So, this ends my writer review. Yes, indeed. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the three simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carrot Rider saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.